Can I just add really quickly? I think I have two thoughts about it. One is that Montgomery County did have the benefit of having a superintendent who stayed for 12 years, and I think there really is a benefit because when you try to bring change, it takes a long time. It's a battle for hearts and minds. So it takes time to invest in training. It takes time to give people the tools and the support. And frankly, our outgoing superintendent would say it took time for him to have all the right people on the bus in terms of really making this happen. I also think it's critically important as a board, when you're searching for a new superintendent, to understand two other things. That you as a school board are the torchbearer. We as a board were very committed to the commitment we had made to closing the achievement gap, raising the bar and closing the gap, equity and excellence, the way we spoke about it. We knew that it was incumbent on us, as we were doing a search and developing the profile of the next superintendent, that we articulate that clearly. It was also incumbent on us to recognize school systems evolve. We weren't looking for exactly the same type of person. When Jerry Weiss came to Montgomery County in 1999, long before I was on the board, it was a system where there were very different educational opportunities for you, depending what color you were and what neighborhood you grew up in. He needed to come in and shake it all up. When he left a system that was very solid and still had a lot of room to grow, but the focus is very different. The superintendent we hired, Josh Starr, to replace Dr. Weiss, is a different person with a different vision, but is the right person, we believe, for this moment. And you have to be very conscious of where your school system is in its own history when you're looking for that match. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to ask a question to Mr. Mann. Say that in November you are elected to be the President of the United States. And I would like to know what would you do in order to integrate the public education with the health care for minorities? What you will do in order to make this particular thing better for communities who need both of those things. Health care to get good education and good education to get good health care.
You know, that is a very important question, because I know we all acknowledge this, that there's nothing more important than people's children. I mean, from their perspective as well as ours, if you become a public servant. And there's nothing more important than their families. And then what we have found out, there's nothing more important than the dignity of everyone having a job or having an opportunity to have a job. And then we found out very recently there's nothing more important than their health care or their perception of health care. And then the other thing that I think is extremely important in this mix is rolling it back to the child issue. You've got to have a great educational opportunity for each child. And what Pat said before about trying to move to Providence, and they said, well, Pat, that's great, you're going to go to Providence, but where are you going to send your kids to school? Is something that is the death knell for every urban area when you start out with the premise that there's nothing more important than my kids. So it all comes down to priorities. And what that means is we've got, you know, and this is not saying any, anything that's a B movie here or a soft adult movie. We've spent a tremendous amount of money around the world pursuing whether it was nation building or regime change, whatever it is. And over the last decade, we have neglected our own economy, our own urban areas, our own population. And it is coming home to roost in a major way, and will for the next several decades if we don't get on it very, very quickly. This election in November is going to have major impact. And I wouldn't mind standing in the kitchen cabinet, as was said by Shirley, to talk to whoever becomes president, to say to them, you have to, all of these things are completely interrelated. You can't send a kid to school, and it's, by the way, it's socioeconomic from our perspective in New Bedford. In many cases, it comes down to minority populations. In New Bedford, poverty is an equal opportunity, sadly, for our population. But the fact of the matter is, and we have about a third that live below the poverty level. And that's why that growth was so important in New Bedford when I was mayor. But here's the point. You have to attack this as a whole person, whole education type of equation. Otherwise, it will not work. You send kids to school, the best teacher in America. If they go home, the house is dark, they can't go outside, they're unsure whether or not they're going to have a decent meal. Their input, we are losing the culture war. Our kids aren't reading at home, they're playing violent video games. I mean, we've reached a point now where this is you know, and again, soapbox is something you want to take advantage of, I think, but we've reached a point here. This is the smartest generation in the history of the world. When you need anything fixed in your house, you grab a 7, 8-year-old kid and they'll do it for you. They'll show you how to run your phone, fix the VCR, the DVD, whatever the heck it is. They can run a computer, but we are not educating them. And what they're learning are things that are completely counterintuitive to being a great citizen or being productive in society. You know, a 9-year-old kid can break down an automatic and put it back together in the dark. But then they have not had any understanding of where they fit in the standpoint of our society, history, whether it's English, math, science, whatever. We're teaching to a test. We are looking at numbers instead of kids' eyes. The whole thing, that's why I said it is the way it's rolled out now. Unless we absolutely demand a change, we're going to see more and more kids that we support, and in the long run, eventually undermine the very society that supports them. So what would I do? Priority. Healthcare, obviously, if you're worried about whether your kids can have their teeth fixed or whether you can get them to the doctor for shots, it's not going to work. If you're sending them to a school with the greatest teacher and then there's nothing to do after school or there's no interactive programs, it will not work. So it's a whole fix. Lawyers can bring about the fix. Because what Pat said is exactly right. You know, if we're educated, if we understand an issue, no matter what side we're on, we will be able to articulate it better than anybody else, you know, or normally better than anybody else. Probably better than most of the 1%. If we're able to sit down and have the facts straight and boil it down and try and find solutions. So my feeling is a priority, but you can't throw money at a problem and expect it to resolve itself. But the fact is, it does take money in order to build the kind of, you know, fixes that you need.
Yeah, I'd like to add one other thing, so we're getting short on time. You don't necessarily have to start out running for the school board in order to get your feet wet in this and make a difference. There are a lot of opportunities like strategic planning committees. Most school districts have some type of a building improvement committee, and so there are really many opportunities to get involved, to get your feet wet, and then work your way into moving up the school board. And again, I certainly endorse your effort for anyone who might even be interested at all in taking a crack at this.
I think we have time for one more question.
Have any of you found that being a lawyer is a detriment? Because it seems like some of the rhetoric that you're hearing that, you know, our profession is not, you know, at the stature that it should be in the eyes of many members of the public, and also having that advanced degree isn't necessarily an asset when running for certain offices. That, you know, you see some of, you know, people in the national scene attacking higher education as a, you know, something that is not to be aspired to. And I was wondering if any of you had to deal with, you know, we don't want a smarty pants on the school board, we want somebody like me.
I think people like to make lawyer jokes and cracks about lawyers, but I think that's kind of at an upper level. I think when you get down to campaign and to run for public office, you need to speak to people one-on-one. So once they meet you, and as long as you're genuine and show some knowledge of education and the community that you're living in and you want to be a part of, I think all those things go away. But there are I know in Arlington there's at times a divide between, let's just say we call the terms are townies and others. And sometimes people that identify as townies or people that grew up there and have lived there for many years and their parents live there, sometimes there is a little bit of a resentment against people that have higher degrees. And that's unfortunate, because I think everyone's working together to try to make your community a better place and to serve all students. But I think when you really get down to campaigning, you just need to go out and speak to all people and listen to all people. And if you're only talking to one group, if you're only talking to those that went to Ivy League universities and colleges, you're going to have trouble. And if you only speak to those that don't have a college degree, you'll be in trouble. You really need to speak with everybody and get everyone's perspective and see how the policies that you'll be generating will help for all students and for the community as well.
I will say I didn't get any pushback on the campaign trail. I think actually a lot of citizens felt like, it's useful to have people with some good credentials. I would say superintendents and administrators are often wary of having attorneys elected to their school board because you ask a lot of questions, which they sometimes don't appreciate. And they worry about you thinking you're a lawyer, but you do have to be very careful. I am not the school system's lawyer by a long shot. I may often suggest questions to our attorney that others may not think about, but I would say that's where the wariness came from.
Okay. Well, thank you very much